There are some people that don't get it this way. I certainly don't get as much out of online courses as I get out of a face-to-face course. But it made me wonder what my job is, what am I really here for? And I kind of had to realize you're pretty much like a coach. Your only point is to motivate the students. I mean, they could totally read the book and do their projects at home, and there are online classes where they do that, but I'm better off if there's a class and I can talk to people and there's a schedule and it just started to keep you moving. But it's, and it turns out colleges remain popular and most people learn better in real face-to-face class, but most people also work better in a real face-to-face job. If you just try to have employees work from home, most companies find that this is not simple at all. A lot of people don't get anything done at home, and they don't have the same kind of supervision they would if you could actually go and see what they're doing. But, those are technical hurdles. And someday we'll have full 3D holograph, two-way between your home and work, and there really will be no difference to the experience to being home and work that matters. And we're getting closer, so I don't know. But some people can get it for free. And the one thing that's why I like these videos and stuff. One thing is there's a lot of people that have no chance to come to school. For example, they have a baby they have to take care of at home, or they're in some place like Africa where there's just no university around teaching any of this stuff. And especially since I teach controversial stuff like hacking, many, many people contact me on the internet and say, I can't find anything like this anywhere around me. I want a video. So it's Juniper classes, for that matter. Juniper classes are not that thick on the ground either. Juniper is the upstart company competing with Cisco and doing very well at it, and you can get Juniper certification. And normally it's rare, but you get a free chance to get free classes. I'm canceling the class on 21st, so I can be in Sunnyvale to take this Juniper class. It's a real certification class, and you get the certification exam at the end. So I would sort of like to finish it, become Juniper certified. That would be good. I don't know if I can do it in 3 days, but maybe. So if you're interested, send me an email. I can let some students go. I'm not just going to publish the exact registration information on the internet, because I shouldn't have everybody in the whole world going. It's supposed to be for our students. This is, for some reason, Juniper's been pushing these classes at teaching conferences, and I guess they decided to have a limited free offer to motivate more interest. But it's very good to learn how to run Juniper routers, and you should know the basics of networking first. It would probably help if you know something about Cisco routers, in my experience with Juniper classes. If you take at least some of the Cisco classes, that would probably be better preparation. But they took that out of the official requirement. They just say you should know the basics, beginner, intermediate knowledge of networking, whatever that means. Sounds like Network Plus and maybe a little bit of Cisco would probably be it. Anyway, I want to tell you how that's a good thing to do. And we're online good. I think I can get down to the hostile. Although I want to mention this one. There's a big hot cryptographic attack out there right now. Transaction layer security has had several padding Oracle attacks. And what happens is the specification for transaction layer security say that you should use cipher block chaining mode, and this has the effect that you put in a packet to encrypt, and if it's not long enough, you pad it. And there's a way to trick the padding into leaking information about the key. There have been a series of these. So if you make a packet and it gets padded, it has a different result. And the latest one is a timing attack, which is a very common side channel attack, where the actual time it takes to do the calculation depends on information in the key. So that's the trick. You can trick it into taking longer to encrypt some packets than others, and by measuring that tiny time difference, you get information about the key. This is a very difficult issue in cryptography, is how do you really stop any subtle detail of the calculation from leaking information about the key. So this one is not a practical attack over the internet yet. It can be done only on local area networks, only under special conditions, but it demonstrates a flaw in the protocol, and so people are going to patch it. The other thing I wanted to demonstrate was data retention. There's a seminal paper that came out in 2010 saying this would be the end of computer forensics because people switch to solid-state devices. And I must say it works. The science of computer forensics is largely based on retained data. If you save files on your hard drive and then you delete them, they do not vanish. They just stay there forever until you reuse that part of the disk. So if you do a forensic examination of the computer, you find all kinds of evidence of what people were doing on there months or years before. But that's not true of solid-state drives, at least not all of them. So I wrote a script to test this on this Mac, because this Mac Air uses an SSD. So I made a folder called Test1, and that folder contains 100 files, each 1 megabyte big. And so I'm going to delete them. So there's all those files. And if I were to delete them with sudo rm star, get the password, they're gone. So I just deleted those files at 11:11. If this was a hard drive, those files would stay on there forever until I save new data on top of it. But because it's an SSD, that is not what happens. And you can see it if you use a disk recovery application, file recovery application to try to find them. And I just searched on the web to find a free one, and I found one called Disk Drill, which is not a very reassuring name, but it works, and it's free. And it's fast, too. So, I don't want to do this, no thanks. Okay, there. So it is recovered from my hard drive, quick scan. This quick scan is really nice. It only takes about 2 minutes because what it does is first it finds where all the free space is and only looks there. And my drive is like 90% full. So that makes it a lot faster than just searching the whole drive for patterns of text, which is what I was doing before with like DD or grep or something. And so it finds all the free space, then it searches for all the free space for things that look like files to rebuild them, and that is pretty fast too. It'll take about 1 minute. And I'll show it to you now, and then I'll show it to you at the end of class. When I did 2 tests, every time you tried to write new junk, you have to wait a long time to erase the old stuff. So in order to avoid that problem, it has a background process called garbage collection that erases all the stuff you're not using on some schedule defined by the manufacturer. It scans the drive to find whatever's not needed and destroys it. And it takes different amounts of time just depending on the disk manufacturer. 28 again, huh? Yeah?
So you wouldn't make it slow when it is doing that process? I mean, you're serious in the computer.
You want to make it slow, you say?
Yes.
Oh, no, you see, that's the point. You do that process when you're not using a drive, which is what really bothers computer forensic examiners, because while you're trying to make an image of the drive, it is changing under you.
It's kind of like RAM.
Yes, like RAM fading under you. And they said the problem, the computer forensic examiners have a process where you image the whole drive. You take every bit, make a file, calculate the MD5 hash, then you do it again and show that it hasn't changed. Then you give one copy to the prosecution, one to the defense, you take the original drive into court and say, there it is, wham, the data is on there. Anybody can take another copy of that data anytime and prove that I'm right. And that's all over now. You take an image, the files are vanishing while you take the image. You take another image, you get a different answer. By the time you give it to the other side, they're all gone. Then you can start screaming at each other, saying, you just made it up, I can't prove that data is real. It's, but that looked to me like I saw another 28 there, unless I made a mistake.
Yeah, there was another 28.
Well, that's fact. See, there's no reason to believe it'll come out gradually. So I forgot to write down the time, but I got 28. Anyway, we'll see what I get this time. It's going to stay at 28 for a while. Now it's 20. Okay, it's going to stay at 28 for a while. So my theory, which I'm just making up, is it had some scan, which got some of them. Now it's going to wait like an hour and have another scan. Get it? Yeah, go ahead.
Is that only for solid state devices?
Yes, only for SSDs. And it doesn't happen over USB drives, or so I've been told. There's a lot of subtleties. Garbage collection is not implemented in all drives. And there's another thing. When you delete a file, the drive often does not know you deleted that file. There's a special command called trim, issued from the operating system to tell the drive, I just deleted that file. And not every operating system supports it. So after class, I'm going to try setting it up in the lab. Kirk went and got an SSD room, stick it in those machines up there, because what people say is Windows 7 supports trim and Windows XP does not support trim. So I ought to be able to do this, boot a machine to XP, and the data will stay there forever, and then boot the same machine to Windows 7, and the data will evaporate. I want to see that happen. Anyway, so we're still at 28, so let me make a note. 11:16, we're still at 28. All right, let's go on to other things, and we come back to this thing at the end of class. That stuff should all be gone. But for some reason, it shrunk from 101 down to 28 quickly, and we will see what becomes of all this. So I think what's happening is you finish chapter 2.
Are they all the same type of files? You just copy and rename,
yeah, just,
copy, rename?
Exactly, just plain text files. Yeah.
Non-solid state drives still being really popular and just getting so cheap, you know?
Well, they're fading. There's an article there about this. The magnetic drive industry is shrinking, and they're getting all freaked out because the only reason people use them at all is because they're cheaper, and SSDs are getting cheaper. So I mean, it used to be SSDs would charge 10 times as much per megabyte, and now I think it's a smaller number. So hard drives will continue to be used, magnetic hard drives by a lot of people, but they will fade, like floppy disks, and CDs are going to fade too. I mean, they're just old technology. Probably in 5 or 6 years, you won't see it much. SSDs are really nice. And the SSDs are getting better in quality. But that will mean you have a whole different issue of computer forensics. So this is basic network stuff. Your Net Plus part. So you should know these. TCP and IP are, of course, the most important protocols used on the internet. That's why you call it TCP/IP. There are many other protocols used, but all much less commonly. UDP is used to send data when you don't care whether it gets there or not, which, as you can imagine, is a rare situation, but there are cases where you don't care. And ARP is used on local area networks to find devices on the way out. A lot of traffic on networks is ARP traffic, but it's only on the local area network. It doesn't go over the internet. And ICMP is used to send error messages and diagnostic messages back and forth, the most common one being ping, where you just request an echo to see if something is up and alive. ICMP has greatly lost its utility since Windows XP Service Pack 2, where Windows machines no longer answer pings. And so you really can't find anything by pinging it anymore, and you pretty much have to do a port scan on port 80 or 445 or something if you want to find something these days. The only thing that answers pings are Unix servers these days, pretty much. Yeah?
Do online video games run on UDP?
I do not know. I think they mostly run on TCP.
Just like online games?
Online games, see, they should. The point,
do.
some do, that's what yeah. You'd see UDP should be faster, but lower quality.
Yeah.
And it would make sense for something like game or streaming video. But I know Netflix runs over TCP, which is a bloody shame. Because they're the main consumer of bandwidth on the internet in many ways. Well, BitTorrent is probably, and after that Netflix, but they're both doing the same thing, and they're both doing something that probably would be better done over UDP. Anyway, so TCP is connection-oriented. It makes sure that the person you're talking to is listening. The way you do on a telephone, you just ring the thing, you pick it up, you say hello, they say hello, and only after that you send your message. So you send a SYN, yeah, that's good, thank you. You send a SYN to them, and then they respond with SYN-ACK, and then you send an ACK. And this has the result that you know the server is up, you know it's listening on that port, and it also sets the sequence of acknowledgement numbers, so you can order all the packets that go in both directions and put them back in order if some of them get lost or appear out of order. Anyway, so this also has the subtle effect. If I send a SYN to a server, the server has to now send a SYN-ACK and wait for the ACK. That consumes resources on the server. It consumes processing power to calculate it, and it consumes RAM as it holds a connection open in RAM, waiting for the ACK. So a common denial of service attack is a SYN flood. You just send a lot of SYNs, and you never send the ACKs. And the server is waiting forever for all these ones to complete, so you can flood the server with half-open connections, they call them, which can use up resources. This is like calling a phone bank and putting every one that answers on hold. Then call it again and put the next one on hold, next one on hold. It can freeze up a server. In general, this is the point. If you want to take down a server, you just need to flood the lines with a lot of traffic. You could send a lot of pings or a lot of anythings, but if you send SYNs, 10 megabits per second of SYNs, it's going to do more damage than sending 10 megabits per second of pings, because the pings don't burden the server as much as those SYNs do. UDP is connectionless, so you do not have a handshake, so you just send data out, and you do not know or care if the other end is receiving it or not. There is never any acknowledgement. There is never putting anything back into order if it gets out of order. There is no sequence number. There is nothing. This is what you use for something like a live news feed. You have a camera recording an event, and you're sending data out, and people either tune in or they don't, and you don't care. You're going to keep it going regardless. Or, for example, live music presentation. You know, that you'll want to replay it later. If you miss a packet, just let there be a static in it and keep going. So this goes just as fast as the server feels like spitting it out. TCP has flow control. TCP has acknowledgments of the data. You send it a packet of data, the window size, and then you wait for an acknowledgement. Okay, I'm ready for the next one, and then you send more. So the client, the receiver, gets to slow down the source if necessary. Say, wait, don't send any more until I'm ready. I'll tell you when I'm ready. So it's very slow compared to UDP, because even if the receiver can take it as fast as the server can send it, it still has to wait for acknowledgments after each group of data. And the main thing on the internet is it typically is a long lag time. It might be 50 milliseconds before round trip time. Just wait to stop sending long enough to get the acknowledgement. Whereas UDP would just keep sending at the speed of your line all the time. All right. IP is the protocol carrying both TCP and UDP. It's the layer 3 protocol. This is what finds the physical location of the computer you're trying to talk to. In IP version 4, you have this 4-bit 32-bit address like this one, 92.168.1.1, and we're all moving to IP version 6, where you'll have this 128-bit address, which is 8 fields, each 4 hexadecimal digits with 16 bits in each one. Much longer addresses, and there are a lot of them. IP version 4 is running out. I guess I didn't show you guys the counter in here, might as well bring it up. Did I? Yeah, good. Anyway, so IP version 6 is going to last forever. And it's much, much bigger than v4. So ARP is what you use on a local area network to find a device. If you want to send traffic to an IP address, like Yahoo or Google or the computer next to you, you can't. Because Ethernet is what you have to use to send data on the network, and Ethernet doesn't have any idea what an IP address is. You have to address it to a MAC address, a layer 2 address. So you have to take the IP address and convert it into a MAC address, and that's what ARP does. And that's why there's a lot of ARP traffic on every network. At the beginning of every data transmission, every machine has to do an ARP to find out where the router is. And then, once it has the router's MAC address, you can send all the data out there. Now, we'll have a cache and remember that address for maybe 2 minutes. But there's always plenty of machines around you that haven't used the network in 2 minutes and need a refresh, and so there's a ton of ARP traffic if you sniff any network. So unfortunately, all these protocols I've described are intrinsically insecure. They all date from an innocent time decades ago when nobody thought about attacks or hackers very much, so none of them have any verification of anything. There's no password, there's no digital signature, there's no cryptography or anything. So if you send a packet, everybody just believes it must be the real packet. There's no genuine mark in that packet. So you can fool all these protocols. You can send TCP packets that pretend to be from somebody else, and there's nothing that will prevent that. And you can send ARP messages that pretend to be from somebody else, and there's nothing to prevent that. So you can lie on your network and say, I am the router. Let's not do this right now. I figure out how to change this nonsense not to happen in the middle of class. That would be good. Anyway, so that's how you put yourself in the middle in wireless networks. You send out a lot of ARPs saying, I am the router, send all your data to me, and then if you're friendly, you forward it. So people do use the internet, they don't see a problem, it's just a little slower, but you're in the middle and you can see everything you do. What was your question back there?
Does the attack have to be on the local LAN for that? Or?
Yes, you do for ARP poisoning. Yeah.
TCP can be used like that, but if TCP needs to verify, like, okay, I say I'm number 1, and to number 2. I'm actually number 3. But number 2 is going to talk to number 3 now to check the TCP, the handshake or...
Well, I'm not quite following you. You're going to impersonate somebody else.
I'm going to impersonate with TCP, but the TCP protocol is going to check if the connection is going. The handshake.
Well, the way
the handshake is not going to reach the attacker.
Yes, well, the way you normally do it is you don't interrupt the handshake. You let that happen, and then you let them log in to something like FTP. And then they start sending commands, which are going to be logged in, and you get the sequence number of those, and you inject your packets with the same sequence number. And this is another issue on the internet, on networks. Networks are really sloppy. Networks lose packets, and they also duplicate packets. Sometimes packets are waiting in a queue in some device, and you run out of time, so they send a replacement packet, and then they both get there. So you can send a packet that claims to be packet number 10,000, when the server's waiting for packet number 10,000 from somebody, and if yours gets there first, it will be accepted, and theirs will be rejected as a useless duplication. And that's silent. There's no message, no error message produced by that. So you can take over a session in progress with TCP. You couldn't if they were using an encrypted protocol like HTTPS, but for protocols like Telnet and FTP, you can. That's that kind of attack. The more common session hijacking attack these days happens at layer 7. That's where you steal a cookie and you break into somebody's Gmail or Facebook or something. It's the same principle, but it happens at a higher level than OSI model.
Is the same as using Wireshark?
You can steal them with Wireshark or any other network sniffer.
Is it the same thing as ARP poisoning?
Our Wireshark is just a sniffer.
Okay.
It just lets you see what's happening, and you'll see the ARPs. It doesn't do the poisoning.
Okay.
But you can use it to detect the poisoning.
Okay.
By looking at the package, yeah. And by the way, ARP poisoning is an extremely noisy attack, very easy to detect if you want to, because it's typically done by just sending out an extra unnecessary ARP message every 1 or 2 seconds. So there's this large flood of unnecessary ARPs, and anybody who makes any attempt to find them can find them, but most people are not running intrusion detection systems of any sort on their local area network, and they just don't see it. There's a thing I used to have in this class, it was in my other class. Decaffeinate ID is something Iron Geek wrote. Iron Geek is great. And he wrote a little simple intrusion detection system you can run to detect if someone's poisoning you on like a hacker convention. It just notices it sees a lot of ARPs and pops up a box, all right. It notices when your default gateway has changed, or it does. So I mean, I don't know if I've shown you here, but if you do Arc minus A, let me make this bigger. So if I do Arc minus A, I'll see the Arc cache, and there it is on my machine is communicating with all these bloody machines. Wow. I don't know why. That's actually a little bit disturbing. What the heck? Well, anyway, I was hoping to find the gateway, which is going to end in 1. There it is, 147, 144, 92, 1. There's the gateway. So that's the gateway address. My machine happens to know it has been doing some transmission that told it that. It's apparently talking to all these other people too, which is a little disturbing.
Is the ARP in a router that the first connected?
Yeah, this is the City College router. This is the gateway out of the whole campus, because I'm on the ordinary City College wireless. The same one as all you.
Where's your website set up?
The website is 147.
Here, or is it run on a separate server? Is it different servers? Or
Which website?
your website?
The main website, the Sam's class.
Well, that's in on a virtual machine somewhere in Chicago or something. It's not a campus website, which probably they didn't give me enough space. And then after I became a target for attack, it became even more logical to move my stuff off the campus network. But anyway, that's what you have. It remembers this from before, and if I lie to this machine with ARC poisoning, it'll get the wrong MAC address for this, and that's what the caffeinated ID would notice. You say, wait a minute, the MAC address of the router just changed. That's not normal. Unless you actually just picked up your machine and moved to a different room, that means somebody's attacking you. Anyway, ICMP lets you can do connectivity tests with ping and trace route and path ping that will just send diagnostic messages out to see whether you reach servers, but it doesn't really work very well on virtual machines anymore because it's typically blocked by default. So I got a few iClicker questions about that stuff. All right, so which one of these is blocked by the Windows firewall? All right, that's of course ICMP. And hey, not unanimous. Well, you think it's easy, but there are people who miss it. So anyway, all right. And that's of course because you don't really need it. Your data is really coming in over things like TCP and UDP. If you block ICMP, it doesn't really hurt you much. Technically, it's used to resend packets that get lost on occasion, but that's not very common. And you can't allow those kinds of ICMP messages out with still unanswered pings. And it's considered more secure not to answer pings because hackers find targets with pings. They'll scan some addresses with ping scan to see what's out there. And if you don't answer, they won't find you, and they'll attack the next guy. You know, it's like I used to have one of these things you put on the steering wheel, these clubs with a lock. And people said, that's ridiculous. Anybody who knows anything about cars, you can just take a wrench and take that off. And I said, yeah, but the car next to me doesn't have it. Which one of these sends data reliably? So you know it got there. All right, that's TCP. That's why you use it all the time. For things like email and web pages and pretty much programs you're downloading, pretty much everything you want it to really get there, you use TCP. All right. Which protocol finds MAC addresses? All right, that's ARP. By the way, there is a thing called reverse ARP that will turn a MAC address into an IP address, but it's hardly ever used these days. It was used in the very old days before DHCP. Which protocol routes packets to the destination computer? All right, that's IP. So everybody has an IP address, and that's what's used to physically find your computer on the internet. So the package can get there. So man-in-the-middle attacks, what protocol do they poison? That's ARP. Okay, good. By the way, you can do it at higher levels. The highest level one I ever came across was about 4 years ago at DEF CON. They used Border Gateway Patrol to route all the traffic from the entire convention through a server in New York for 3 days and record it all. And on the last day, they had a talk where they explained how they did this, and nobody noticed. 3 days of network traffic, everything going through New York and back. And China did that several times, rerouting individual business traffic from America through China so they could snoop on it for a period of like half an hour. First they said it was a mistake, but it's happened about 5 times to where it's very clear that they're practicing with the weapon. Because now they can force the certificates too, so they can decide, we think something important is going through Gmail, let's capture all the Gmail in New York for the next half hour and read it all. And they can totally do that. We can do it too. Yeah.
Do a lot of people connect to any servers or whitelist around DEF CON?
I would just
Sure.
see that as a huge security risk.
Only the timid people don't. Reporters don't. They make a big deal about how I don't take my cell phone, I don't take anything there. Everybody else is going there to hack people, yeah. Dude, get away with stuff like that at DEF CON. Everybody brings their stuff.
Okay.
But unless you're like scared, you know, then you don't, of course. But UDP. When you want to start a UDP session, what do you say? Right, and good, I didn't fool very many people. UDP has no handshake. There's no such thing as a session. You don't ask permission, you don't prepare it in any way, you just spit it out there. Like me, I'm yelling, somebody might not be listening. There's no feedback, you know, like the real world. So, all right, TCP. If you want a TCP session, how do you open that? That's glorious SYN for synchronize. Start with the SYN, then the server responds SYN-ACK, and then you respond with an ACK. Then you're ready to go. All right, so those things are not encrypted. Let me just check my time. Oh, good, we're on good track here. All right, so all those protocols I just described are only concerned with availability. They get the data to the destination. Most of the time, they do not do much in the way of making sure anything is done right. And in particular, you can forge any of those packets. There is no signature, no secret, no nothing. So any of that stuff can be false and misleading. And so if you want any kind of confidence that nobody else is reading your packets and that you actually know who you're talking to, you have to add something in addition to TCP and IP and UDP and all that jazz. So you use higher level protocols up at layer 7, which add stuff like encryption and certificates to control that. So SSH is secure shell. That's the replacement for Telnet. Telnet sends command line commands letter by letter to the other end with no encryption. SSH does it with encryption. Secure sockets layer is originally invented by Netscape. This is used to secure web traffic primarily in HTTPS, although it's mostly the later version of it called TLS, which is the replacement to SSL. And IPsec is much touted by enthusiasts of IP version 6 that say everyone will use IPsec and it will make you safe, and that is pretty much just garbage. It's just marketing lies. The fact is IPsec is available in IP version 4. It's very rarely deployed in IP version 6. It's used for virtual private networks and such. It's an encryption protocol that can make you safe, but it's not particularly related to IP version 6 at all. It was originally part of the IP version 6 specification. It was so cool they backported it to IP version 4 long ago, so it's got nothing to do with that. Anyway, so SSH, Telnet goes on port 23, and every single time you press a key, it sends a packet with one letter in it to go to the other end, and you can just catch them in Wireshark and see your password, P-A-S-S-W. So it's pretty lame. And a lot of people still use it to control routers and switches, and you can still log into the City College Hills and Fog server with Telnet and do your homework that way. That's not a wise idea. If they asked me, I'd go block it all at the firewall. Block port 23, don't let your company use it. If some clown is still using Telnet, hit them with something until they quit, knock it off. I should be using SSH. SSH encrypts the Telnet traffic, so you can still send command line commands, but they're encrypted, so people can't snoop on them so easily. There's also secure copy protocol and secure file transfer protocol that all run by taking FTP and the Linux remote copy command and running them all through port 22 on SSH, so that all of them are encrypted. The only significant problem with SSH is it is free. It does not use a certificate you purchased at the server, so when you connect, it's subject to a possible man-in-the-middle attack. A person could run a fake server. You might be talking to the wrong server right from the beginning, and you wouldn't know because it doesn't have a third party like VeriSign to authenticate the server. So you're supposed to memorize this fingerprint. Something will pop up, the fingerprint of your server is a bunch of random letters, and you're supposed to notice that if that's wrong. That's your only protection against spoofing the server right from the start of the session. Yeah?
And those certificates are expensive, aren't they not?
They are, unfortunately. They used to cost like thousands of dollars a year. Now they cost hundreds of dollars a year. For a while, they got really cheap, and sometimes even free, about 2 years ago, and then a bunch of them got hacked into because they got so cheap they had a bunch of sleazy bums doing a rotten job selling discount certificates. So now they're kind of getting more expensive again. So yeah, that's why most people can't afford them. So they accept some risk of their server being spoofed. SSL lets you, it's normally used for HTTP. It runs on 443 instead of port 80. And you can also secure LDAP if you want to, lightweight direct access protocol, which is used in networks, Active Directory networks, although I haven't heard of people using the encrypted version of it very much. But HTTPS is, of course, very common, and every time you log in on the web, you should make sure you see an HTTPS website before you type in a password or a credit card number or anything like that. HTTPS has some security vulnerabilities that have been coming out lately, but it is the best thing we have to use right now. Yeah.
But usually it's a pain in the neck for like network security people to like transfer HTTPS to HTTP because it's mostly a lot of encryption. Whatever.
Well, you can do it. You'll do it in the project here. You'll set up an HTTPS server. It's not really that bad. I used to think that you just say it's a lot of burden to set up your server to do HTTPS. It's not really. You have to put a certificate on it. The only real burden is you have to pay for the bloody certificate. Or you can do what we do in the project, use a self-signed certificate, which is not as secure and will pop up warnings in the browser, but it's still better than HTTP. HTTP is like Telnet. All your data is just going in plain text for anybody to steal. HTTPS does encrypt it. Yeah.
So it'd be like hosting a server and you could block port 80, but you would open up 443?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to open 443 if you want to have this. Normally you have both 80 and 443 because usually you have secret content and non-secret content, like your advertising page and stuff. And you only make them go to the secure part when they need to. That's why the steal and cookie attack works so well, because almost every website, like Facebook and everything, you go to a secure session, you put in your password, then you go to an insecure session to actually view your wall, and it sends you a cookie, and anybody can steal that cookie and use your session. Gmail is the first service that finally switched to HTTPS all the time, which means they're encrypting all your mail, which is something they resisted because it cost them some processing power to encrypt your mail. And email is sent all over the web unencrypted anyway. It's not secret. So why are they wasting their time encrypting stuff that hasn't been protected at other stages of transfer? They resisted it, but they finally just bit the bullet and said, all right, people are screaming about this, so we'll just turn on HTTPS all the time. And they say in a giant Google cluster, I think it only cost them like a couple % more in processing power. Anyway,
So you rather be
yeah.
safe than sorry about it than have like lawsuits coming after you.
That's probably what really drives it. People are worried about lawsuits, and Google's worried about their image. I mean, Google really started as a very moral, ethical company. They were real proud of having green power generation and doing everything right, turning on all kinds of security measures that were not really necessary for business needs right away. They originally started with very idealistic things. They had their principles. The number one principle was don't be evil. And they tried to avoid becoming a corporation because they knew, because they were graduates of the Stanford Business School, what would happen if you became a corporation. And when they did, they quietly removed the don't be evil motto. They said, well, that's the end of that. Because once you're a corporation, you have to be evil. Because evil becomes good. Because people invest their money in they've invested their pension plan in your company and they expect dividends. So ripping off your customers to make more money to pay those dividends is good. Doing the right thing and making less money is bad. Now you have two contradictory people pulling in two directions. There's no longer any good or evil. Good for these is bad for them. Good for them is bad for them. Now you're hosed. All your moral purity is down to evil compromises now. Like if you become president. So you discover it's not so simple. I can't just make one decision and make everybody happy anymore. So that's what they did. Yeah.
I was just curious, you said HTTPS has some vulnerabilities now, but it's the best that we have.
Yes.
Is Java one of the issues? Because I noticed that Mac is not allowing you to go to financial websites.
Java is a huge problem. It always has been. Right now it's hitting the news. People are noticing how bad it is lately because of a couple new attacks. But it's an independent attack. Java is also a huge problem. Even if you don't use Java, HTTPS has been revealed in the last 3 years to provide far less security than you thought. 4 years ago, I would teach my classes, and I would say HTTPS is wonderful. You connect to the server sends you a certificate, you verify at a third party like VeriSign or something, and you really know who you're talking to, and you're not talking to anybody else. And I can't say that anymore without laughing, because an Iranian guy called the Komodo hacker hacked into 4 certificate authorities and stole their stuff. So you could be talking to the government of Iran, or any hacker that's as smart as him that stole their certificate is pretending to be VeriSign. And TrustWave, 9 months ago, admitted that they routinely sell root certificates to any company that wants to pay for them, so the company can open your HTTPS encryption at their firewall and see what you're doing. They can impersonate the certificate authority, which is a fundamental violation of the entire system. You're supposed to only have these trusted certificate authorities and nobody else. And they're supposed to not be your boss or the email company. It's supposed to be a disinterested third party that only cares about ensuring the quality of transmission, not about snooping on your mail. But now if you go to You know, I went to DEF CON, opened Gmail, and I said, I'm safe, I'm using HTTPS. They got into my system. I said, wait a minute. And that kind of woke me up. It's been, people have been blasting it right and left. It turns out it's still better than nothing. If you don't use HTTPS, a ton of people can steal your data. If you use HTTPS, only really rich corporations and governments and the best hackers can steal your data. That's as far as we go. But it's far from the beautiful perfection that we all expected out of it. And it's not really because of the mathematical flaws in it, it's because of the human flaws. The people you trusted turn out to be stabbing you in the back. That's usually what happens. The math is fine, but all the people are doing sneaky, rotten things they were not supposed to do. So SSL got kind of old and had some vulnerabilities, some mathematical problems, so TLS came out, and there are a couple versions of this. Essentially replaces SSL, and actually almost nobody's using people aren't really using SSL much anymore. They're really using TLS, but they commonly call it the same. It's essentially a replacement for it. Ipsec is a more complicated encryption scheme. Bruce Schneier is the head of security for British Telecom, and he is a big celebrity in the security community. He's probably the most famous cryptographer. And he wrote a paper analyzing several cryptography systems, and he wrote a paper analyzing Ipsec, and he said, it is so complicated that I cannot make an authoritative statement about how secure it is, but it appears to be very secure. But people cannot grasp it. It is very complicated. Anyway, this is probably the most secure thing you can use, and some virtual private networks use it. I think you've got projects in this class where you set up an Ipsec VPN. It's not that hard to set up. It's got an authentication header and an encapsulating security payload. Unfortunately, it sends data with these goofy protocols. TCP and UDP are not the only layer 4 protocols. They're just the most common ones. There are other layer 4 protocols, and Ipsec uses some of them, and that means it's a problem to get it through home routers. Anyway, all right, I got a few icebreaker questions. So for HTTPS sessions, what protocol should you be using? That question is not as stupid as it appeared to be at first. Until 30 seconds. There is a better answer. Okay. All right, TLS is what you ought to be using. SSL is the older, more vulnerable version. And there is a downgrade attack on servers. When you set up a server, you specify what protocols you will accept. There are different versions of HTTPS. And if you let people negotiate back to the really old versions, it's fairly vulnerable. One of the simplest ones is if you tell them your Windows 95 and IE3 or so, then you can only use 40-bit encryption, which is trivial to crack. And some servers will still let you do that because they haven't updated their config files since the 90s. But TLS is the more secure modern version and what you ought to be using. Only very old machines actually use straight SSL anymore. And if they do, they're subject to a variety of attacks. So which one of these was developed for IPv6? IP security, D. So if you want your telnet to be more secure, what protocol should you use? All right, that is SSH, SSH Secure Shell. And which one of them uses the AH and the ESP? All right, that is IPsec. Okay, good.